The titans of old are awakening once again, ready to reclaim their place in a world that has grown cold and mechanical. Witness the epic scale of our latest series, where legends return to the light of day. Click subscribe now and be there for the return.
The call came at 2047 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been lying awake anyway, staring at the water stain on my bedroom ceiling that I kept meaning to fix, listening to the rain hit the window in uneven bursts. My phone lit up on the nightstand, and I grabbed it fast, the way you always do at that hour, heart already doing that stupid little skip before you even see the name. It was my neighbor, Gwen. She lived 3 houses down, the yellow one with the broken mailbox her landlord had been promising to fix since March. We weren't close, exactly. We waved. We talked over the fence a few times. She'd brought my Amazon packages inside twice when I wasn't home, left little sticky notes on my front door. "Your stuff is safe with me, Gwen." That kind of neighbor. The good kind you don't fully appreciate until you need them, I answered. She was whispering. That was the first thing that knocked the sleep out of me. Not the hour, not even her name on my screen. The whispering. "Hey," she said, so quietly I pressed the phone hard against my ear. "I'm sorry to call this late. I needed to tell you something." "Gwen?" I sat up. "What's wrong?" A pause. Long enough that I pulled the phone away to check we were still connected. "Don't turn your porch light on," she said. "And don't look out your front window, okay? Just, please don't." I remember sitting there on the edge of my bed in the dark, feet on the cold floor, trying to make sense of what she'd just said. My brain was still slow with almost sleep, and the words weren't lining up into anything that made sense. "What are you talking about? Gwen, what's going on?" "I can't explain right now." Her voice dropped even lower, and I had to strain to hear her. "Just stay away from the front of the house. Keep your lights off. I'll explain later, I promise." And then she was gone. I sat there holding the phone for a full minute, maybe longer. The rain kept going. Somewhere down the street, a car alarm went off and then went silent. My house made its usual sounds. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboard near the hallway that always does that for no reason. I should have listened to her. I know that now. I got up. I told myself I was just going to check the locks. That was reasonable, wasn't it? Someone calls you at 2 a.m., whispering, "You check your locks." I padded down the hallway in the dark, one hand on the wall, and I checked the front door first. Deadbolt was on. Chain was hooked. I rattled it once just to feel certain. Then I stood there in my own entryway in the pitch black, and I thought about what she'd said. "Don't look out your front window." You know what happens when someone tells you that. You try not to. You really try. You stand there and you breathe and you tell yourself you're an adult who doesn't need to look out a window at 2 a.m. just because a neighbor called you whispering cryptic things that... I looked. I pulled back the edge of the curtain maybe 2 inches. Just enough. I wasn't even sure what I expected to see. A raccoon. Someone's dog loose in the yard. Some mundane thing that would make me feel embarrassed for being scared. There was a car parked at the curb across from my house that I didn't recognize. That alone wouldn't have meant anything. People park on this street all the time. It's a public road. But this car had no lights on, which was normal for a parked car, and I couldn't tell if anyone was inside. The rain was too heavy, and the streetlight was too far, and I was squinting through glass at 2 in the morning, trying to figure out if there was a shape in the driver's seat. I let the curtain fall back. My mouth was dry. I told myself it was nothing. Told myself Gwen was probably having some kind of episode. She'd mentioned once, casually, that she sometimes had bad anxiety. I almost went back to bed. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Gwen. "Are you near the front of the house?" I typed back fast. "I just checked my locks. What is happening?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Someone has been watching your house for the past hour. I can see from my upstairs window. Gray Honda. I'm scared to call 911 because I don't know if it's nothing, and I didn't want to call your phone and have it ring loud, and I'm sorry I should have explained more. Are you okay?" I read it twice. Gray Honda. I looked up from my phone even though I was standing in my dark hallway with no windows. Just some instinct, something animal telling me to pay attention. I typed, "I can call 911. Are you safe? I'm inside." I didn't want to text earlier in case they saw my light. I turned my phone brightness all the way down. "Please call them." Here's the thing about calling 911 in a situation like this. You feel ridiculous. Your brain keeps offering you outs. What if it's just someone who parks there? What if they're waiting for someone inside one of these houses? What if I'm about to make a big scene over nothing and my neighbor never makes eye contact with me again? I called anyway. The dispatcher was calm in that way. They train them to be, that steady voice that somehow makes you feel like you've done the right thing by calling, and also like you might be overreacting both at once. I gave her my address. I told her what Gwen had told me. I said there was a gray Honda parked outside my house, and someone may have been watching it for over an hour, and I didn't know why. She said units would be on their way and to stay away from the windows and to keep the line open. I went and sat on the floor in my hallway. Not the bedroom, not the living room. The hallway, which felt the most interior, the most hidden. I sat with my back against the wall and the phone pressed to my ear and I listened to the rain. At some point, I texted Gwen. I called. "They're coming. Keep your lights off. Don't come outside." She replied with just, "Thank you. I'm so sorry." I didn't know what she was sorry for yet. The longest 12 minutes of my life passed. I counted a lot of things during those 12 minutes. I counted the number of times the dispatcher checked in with me. 4. I counted the number of cars that drove down my street. 1. Headlights sweeping past. Gone. I counted the number of times I convinced myself this was absolutely nothing, and the number of times something in my gut said no. There was a moment, about 7 or 8 minutes in, when I heard something. Not from outside, exactly. More like near the side of the house. A sound you'd normally explain away. The kind of thing that happens in an old house in the rain, wood expanding or the gutter doing something, or an animal on the porch. I've lived in this house for 4 years and I know all its sounds. This wasn't one of them. I told the dispatcher I heard something near the side of my house. Her voice stayed even. She said she was relaying that. She said she was relaying that. She said the units were close. She said I was doing great. And to stay where I was. I gripped my phone so hard, my hand hurt. The sound didn't repeat. When I finally heard the police sirens, faint at first, then closer, I felt something come loose in my chest that I hadn't realized had been clenched. I just sat there on my hallway floor and breathed. I heard the cars pull up. I heard voices outside, low and official. Through the front door, I could see the flicker of flashlights crossing back and forth across the thin strip of light at the bottom. When the knock came, it was 3 hard raps. "Police, Miss Calloway, you can open the door." I opened the door. There were 2 officers on my porch, both young, both in rain-wet jackets. One of them was a woman with her hair pulled back, and she had this expression that was professional and kind in equal measure, and I was so relieved to see another person that I almost said something embarrassing. She told me they'd found the vehicle. She told me they had a man in custody. She didn't tell me who he was yet. That came later. They let me know after the fact, in pieces the way these things always come out. You ask a question and you get part of an answer, and then 3 days later, you find out something else, and the picture slowly assembles itself into something you can look at all at once. His name was Owen. He was my ex-boyfriend's younger brother. I had dated my ex Brian for almost 2 years. We'd broken up 11 months ago, as civilly as 2 people can break up after that long. No screaming, no dramatic final scene. Just the quiet kind of ending that comes when 2 people have slowly become strangers to each other. I hadn't spoken to Ryan in almost 4 months. I thought that chapter was just closed. What I didn't know was that Ryan had been telling his brother things, not normal things. Ryan had apparently convinced himself, somewhere in the gap between our ending and that night, that I had done something to him, that I owed him something. I don't know all of it, and I'm not sure I want to. People build their own stories, and sometimes those stories have nothing to do with what actually happened. Owen wasn't there to hurt me. That's what the officer said, and I believe her, because there's no evidence otherwise. But he had been there. He had been sitting in that gray Honda in front of my house in the rain at 2 a.m. for over an hour. And he had my address because Ryan had given it to him, or left it somewhere Owen could find it. And that is enough. That is more than enough. I asked about Gwen. I went to see her the next morning. I brought coffee, 2 large cups from the place on Birchwood that she'd mentioned once she liked, and I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, she looked like she hadn't slept either. We stood on her porch for a while before either of us said much. She wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. Her porch faces mine at an angle, and I could see my own house from where we stood, looking ordinary and small, and just like it always does in the morning. She told me she'd been up late, like she often is. Insomnia, she said. The same kind she's had for years, the kind that wakes you up at midnight and doesn't let go until almost dawn. She'd been sitting by her upstairs window with a book, and she'd noticed the car. She noticed it because she knows the street, knows which cars belong to which houses, and that one didn't belong to anyone. She watched it for a while, thinking it was probably nothing. Then she watched it for a while more. Then she noticed the person inside hadn't moved and hadn't left, and the lights had never come on, and the rain was coming down, and something about all of it made her feel cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. She said she almost didn't call. She almost told herself it wasn't her business. She almost went back to her book. I thought about that for a second, about how close it came to her just not calling, and about me, asleep on the other side of that window with no idea. "Why did you tell me not to look out front?" I asked, instead of just telling me why. She looked a little embarrassed. "I don't know," she said. "I was scared. I thought if you turned a light on or moved the curtain, they might know I'd noticed them. I wasn't thinking clearly. I should have explained more." "You explained enough," I said. She shook her head slightly, looking out at the street. "I kept thinking, what if I'm wrong and this is nothing? What if I ruin your sleep for no reason, and then you feel stupid for being scared, and then you're annoyed at me for the rest of the year?" She laughed a little, the uncomfortable kind. I almost talked myself out of it 4 times. "I'm glad you didn't." She looked at me. "Me too," she said, quietly. "There is something strange that happens to you after something like this. Not right away. Right away you just feel relief and exhaustion and this slightly unreal quality to everything, like you're walking around inside a photograph of your own life. But after a few days, when the adrenaline has completely worked out of your system and the police report has been filed and you've called your sister in Denver who immediately offered to fly out even though you told her she didn't have to. After all of that, something else settles in. Fear, but a specific kind, the retrospective kind. I kept thinking about the back door. When I was checking my locks that night, I checked the front door and the side windows, but I went right past the back door because I was distracted by my phone. I found out later that the officer who walked the perimeter of my house noted that my back gate was unlatched. The wind had blown it open. Probably, or it hadn't caught properly when I'd taken the trash out 2 nights before. There was nothing in the yard. No one had come back there, but the gate had been open. I think about that a lot. I think about how a person can be in their own home feeling the specific safety of familiar walls and still be only a few feet and a few decisions away from something that changes everything. I think about Gwen sitting up at her window with her book, doing the quiet work of paying attention. I think about how many times we all almost don't make the call, almost don't say something, almost let it go because it might be nothing and we don't want to bother anyone. I had a locksmith come out the next week and assess every point of entry in my house, new deadbolts on the front and back, a security bar for the sliding door in the kitchen, a camera on the porch. Not because I'm convinced something will happen again. I don't live like that, or at least I'm trying not to. But because there's a version of that night that went differently, and I'm aware of it now in a way I wasn't before, and pretending I'm not aware of it seems like the wrong response. Owen was charged. The details of what happens next are still moving through the system the way those things do. Slowly, with a lot of paperwork and not a lot of answers for the people waiting on the other end. I've talked to a victim's advocate twice. I've written down everything I remember, in order, the way they asked me to. Ryan called once, about a week after. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that I listened to once and then deleted. He said he didn't know his brother was going to do that. He said he was sorry. He said he hoped I was okay. I don't know if any of it is true. I don't know what he told Owen, or how much he knew, or whether sorry means anything when the thing has already happened. I'm not ready to figure that out yet. Maybe I won't be for a while. And that's okay. I'm allowed to take up the exact amount of time I need. I've started leaving my porch light on at night. I know that sounds like it contradicts something, but it doesn't, not really. A light doesn't make you invisible to the wrong people. But it does mean Gwen can see my porch from her upstairs window. It does mean the street isn't quite so dark. It's a small thing, and it's the right small thing, and sometimes those are the only kind of things you have. She and I have coffee on Saturday mornings now, when both our schedules allow. Sometimes on her porch, sometimes mine. We talk about ordinary things. The neighbor 2 blocks over who finally got his gutters replaced, the new coffee shop that opened on Maple, and whether it's actually good, or just aesthetically good, the weird dreams that come with insomnia and how you learn to live around them. Sometimes we talk about that night, but mostly we don't need to. There's a version of my life where she didn't call, where she talked herself out of it one more time and went back to her book, and I lay there on the other side of my water-stained ceiling, completely unaware. Where that car sat at the curb until it didn't, and I never knew it had been there at all, and nothing happened, and I was fine. Maybe that's the version that was always going to happen. Maybe Owen was never going to get out of the car. Maybe the worst of it was already over before Gwen ever picked up the phone. But I'll never know that version. I only know this one. And in this one, at 2047 in the morning, my neighbor called me. She whispered. And even though I didn't quite listen, even though I went to the window anyway, because I am the kind of person who always has to see for herself, she had already done the thing that mattered. She had already made the call. I almost paid the price for my own stubbornness that night, for the part of me that always has to look, always has to check, always needs to confirm what I've been told before I'll believe it. I've always been like that. My mother would say it's a flaw. I'd normally argue. Standing in my hallway in the dark at 2 a.m. with my back against the wall, I wasn't so sure she was wrong. What I know is this. Pay attention to the people who notice things. The ones who sit by their windows with their books and track the small wrongnesses in a familiar street. The ones who almost don't call but call anyway. The ones who apologize for waking you because they weren't sure it was enough of a reason, and it turns out it was more than enough. They are the ones who keep you safe in ways you'll never fully see. I leave the light on now, every night. I've thought a lot about what made that night end the way it did. Not the police arriving, not Owen sitting in that car, I mean the whole chain of it. The way one small decision pulled the next one forward until there was an outcome instead of something I don't want to name. Gwen almost didn't call. She told me that herself, standing on her porch with her coffee, looking a little embarrassed about it. She talked herself in and out of picking up that phone 4 times. 4 times, she almost chose to mind her own business, which is what we're all quietly taught to do. Don't make it awkward. Don't be the person who cried wolf. Don't impose your worry on someone else's night. She called anyway, and that one act, that small, uncertain, almost didn't happen act, is the thing that everything else hangs on. I think about that when I'm tempted to stay quiet about something. When I notice something feels off and I start running through all the reasons it's probably nothing. There's a version of courage that looks dramatic, the kind in movies where someone runs toward danger. But the courage Gwen showed was quieter than that. It was just the willingness to be wrong in front of someone, to call and maybe feel foolish afterward. That's actually harder than it sounds. And then there's me, standing in the dark hallway with my back against the wall, and the part I'm less proud of. I looked out the window. She told me not to. The first thing she said was don't. I did it anyway because I have always needed to confirm things for myself before I'll believe them. My whole life I've been that way. It has served me well sometimes. That night it could have cost me. What I've come to understand is that intelligence isn't just about knowing things. It's about knowing when to trust someone else's knowing. Gwen had been watching that street from her window for an hour. She had more information than I did, and instead of receiving that, I second-guessed it, because accepting it meant accepting that something was actually wrong, and part of me wasn't ready for that to be true. We do that. We resist the information that asks something of us. The thing about Owen and Ryan, about that whole situation, is that none of it came from nowhere. The choices Ryan made in the months after we ended, the stories he told himself and apparently shared with his brother, The way that quiet resentment found a shape and a gray Honda and a dark street at 2 a.m., that's a long chain of small decisions made by someone who never stopped to ask whether what he was feeling was what was actually true. That's what unchecked bitterness does when nobody ever pushes back on it. It convinces itself it's justified. I am not angry, or I'm working on not being angry, which is different and more honest. What I feel more than anger is a kind of tired clarity. The understanding that the people who keep you safe are usually the ones who chose, quietly and without drama, to show up. And the people who threaten it are usually the ones who stopped asking whether they were being fair. I put a camera on my porch. I got new locks. I have coffee with Gwen on Saturday mornings when we're both free. These are not dramatic things, but they are the right ones, and most of the time, doing the right thing just looks like that. Small, undramatic, and steady. I leave the porch light on now, every single night.